Well, fall camp is underway for Utah football, and Morgan Scalley revealed a key area on offense the Utah Utes have to get better at.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen and view of the day. I'm JG Wistrcill, excited to be joined on today's show by Brice Larson, one of the co-hosts of Brice and BYU, which you can listen to from 7 to 10 a.m. Mountain Time on 103.9 and 98.3 FM on the Utah airwaves each and every morning. On today's show, we're going to get a little bit of update of what's going on with our rival BYU down at their fall camp. Also, talk about the week 2 fall camp buzz, just what we're hearing about the team so far. But Brice, let's start with a comment I really appreciated from Morgan Scalley, because, at fall camp, it's always a balance and a battle of how much are you going to reveal about what's going on with your team. And I really appreciated him revealing this area where Utah is struggling in. And he said this is an area he wants to see them get better. He revealed to us in our earlier scrum today where he said, we're still working on the situational football, a lot of 2-minute, 4-minute drills, different stuff like that. We're not good enough in the 2-minute situation right now in the offense. That's something we need to clean up. And I appreciate that insight. That is definitely interesting. We've heard a lot about this wide receiver core, all the work they've put in together. This is where that group usually time to shine, but sounds like it's still a work in process, still early in fall camp, but notable. He said that they're not there quite yet.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, that is a huge piece on the offensive side of the football that can win you or lose you games, as we've seen in the past. And something, especially when you have an opportunity going into the half and you can double up a team where you can get the ball coming out of halftime as well, and you can find a way to go put points up on the board. It's a massive, massive piece to this football thing that these coaches work on day in and day out. It's funny because in the NFL, a lot of times we hear that the preseason games aren't really worth a lot to these head coaches because you can't really control what happens in the preseason games and put your team into hard situations. What they love more is those joint practices where the coaches can talk to each other and say, this is what we want to work on. These are the situations we want to work on. Why do you think they do that? Because the most important thing for these teams in the NFL are situational football, where they can rep over and over. And when the time comes during the game, when it's win or lose in that moment, they're ready to rock and roll on the field. That's what Morgan Scalley's seeing with his team right now. They need to be better in certain situations so that when those situations arrive during the season, they can be a much better football team and actually win games. Because I think he realizes that the margins for this team might be a little bit more thin than teams in the past. Maybe they don't have as much talent, but if they can be smart in the IQ department and win football games situationally, they could win a couple more games here or there.
You don't need a 2-minute offense when you're up by 20 because you just can run on anyone, anywhere. That won't be the case for this team. And Morgan spoke about the offensive line. They're making progress. So is the defensive line. Feels like they're in a good spot. It feels like they're in a normal spot for a Utah offensive line. Maybe obviously a little less because of the new guys. But I think this will be a fine offensive line that Utah has. But they will not be a dominant offensive line. And Brice, it's a fact of the matter that even with last year's dominant Utah football team, they did not have a special 2-minute offense. Like, yes, they had the game against Kansas State where they were able to come back and make some big plays. And Dampier had the one big throw to Larry Simmons, I remember, of the middle of the field. But the biggest play of that drive was his legs. And when he ran on that 4th and 1 for a big game too. Dampier is a good passer. He's made some nice plays and nice throws, but he is not the elite of the elite when it comes to dropping in pinpoint balls. And I think this is an area where if Utah's 2-minute offense wants to be better, they do need him to continue to grow as a passer.
Got to be able to sling that pill and do it accurately too. But not only that, you got to make sure some of these newcomers, sometimes other coaching staffs across college football, when you get guys in the transfer portal, don't know necessarily. Like, you'd think guys at the college level would have pretty good football IQ and would know situationally what you're supposed to do. You'd be surprised actually how many dudes on the football field don't know what they're supposed to do in these situations. How often do we see it in college football that guys just don't know when they should be in the hurry up, when they should line up, where they need to be, if they need to spike the ball, those types of things. And all of that can cost you valuable yardage and cost you a game at the end of the day.
It's so true. And for Utah, it'll be interesting to see because last year, definitely their issues through the air at Texas Tech, a BYU at times too. I mean, Devon Dampier's interception against the Cougars, he was chucking it to Daniel Bray down the field. So these are the problems that Utah had stretching the field last year. So it's a work in progress. I do think it's something that will still, I think it'll be better, the 2-minute offense this year than last year because of the wide receiver talent they had there. But it is just a reminder that this stuff is all a work in progress. I think there is some advantages to this, Bryce, probably. It's a reminder that the Utah defense is doing their part too. And we have questions along the offensive and defensive line. I feel really good about this cornerback room. When you look at a James Chenault coming over from South Florida, Sharif Shaw last week telling us that Rock Caldwell is the guy he's really excited about. Elijah Reed coming over from Akron. I feel like this secondary and the safety room, I've said, might be the best position group on the entire roster. I think they go 4 starting caliber guys to me, and then 2 other guys in Marcus Wimberly and maybe even a Davis Andrews, I think could be really good players if called upon in certain times. So I just feel like this secondary is very talented. That's probably part of the reason you're seeing that growth still happen where they're holding the offense back a little bit.
Yeah, no doubt about it. That's always something where it's always something that's really hard to tell without being able to see practice. In terms of the hype that's coming out of it, like, oh yeah, the offense won the day, but you don't really know in what kind of context the offense won the day, right? And just as you mentioned, the defense won the day. Okay, but how did they exactly win it? What did they do to be able to win in practice today? And when you're allowed to go and watch a little bit of practice, then you can kind of get that context. Oh, they got after it on the defensive line, or they got after it where you can't hit the quarterback, so the quarterback was sailing the ball 10 yards over. Well, that's not really the defense's win. You know what I mean? Yeah, you win, but the quarterback threw the ball 10 yards over his head. So that type of context sometimes eludes us when we can't go and see practice, but I do think that there might be a little bit of that with Utah in terms of the defense is so good that it might be holding the offense back a little bit, or iron sharpens iron, JT. Make them a little bit better.
That's the hope for sure. That was the biggest thing that stuck out to me was just him talking about the 2-minute offense. How about for you, Bryce? What was from the quotes and things you saw, what was the biggest thing that caught your attention amidst the coach speak we always get?
Yeah, no doubt about it, right? No, I think a couple of different things coming out of Utah Fall Camp in the last couple of weeks. Biggest question marks in terms of what's happening with this Utah football team on the defensive line. I thought the chip on the shoulder commentary coming out of early on in fall camp, where you're talking to multiple different guys and the same theme about how Morgan Scalley's talking about how, hey, they hear the external noise. They hear what's happening out there, and they know that they have to be better because of what they lost along the defensive line. Well, what does that look like? What does that mean for these guys? You got to find the motivation. And a lot of times the disrespect plays a huge factor in all of this. And if you're going to go into a season disrespected, somehow coaches figure out how to do this. Teams in the NFL win a Super Bowl and then come out, and I don't know how, JT, but they figure out a way that they're disrespected, the Seattle Seahawks, and they're like, we're going to go and win another Super Bowl because nobody respects us. We just won. We should be the best team in the league. Everybody thinks the Rams are going to win the Super Bowl. That's disrespectful. So in a similar way, this Utah team, with the motivation factor, they're going to use the disrespect of this defensive line is not good enough. Oh, they're not the same guys. They're not as good to be able to become better. And I think that that's actually a pretty big key because for once in a long time, Utah they've been so good over the last decade that it's been hard to find that motivation. But since they've had, a couple of years here or there where there's been some questions about this team, now their coach leaves, a lot of players leave with them, that motivation is right back in there. And I actually think that'll help this team overachieve this upcoming season.
I think that's the hope, and I think it's the goal. And you're right. There's always the creative ways you find motivation. I will say, at least for those returning Utah defensive tackles, their motivation should be the first half against Kansas State last year when the Wildcats just ran all over them. And, there's actually another position group that has some interesting motivation that I want to talk about next when we come back on Locked On Utes. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at The Game. Since 1986, The Game has been creating classic college hats that fans are proud to wear. Whether you're an alumni, current student, or season ticket holder, or just simply someone who never misses a game, a great college hat is more than just apparel. It's a way to represent your school wherever you go. This year, The Game is celebrating its 40th anniversary by giving fans a chance to save on some of their most iconic college hats. If you've been thinking about replacing an old favorite or adding a new one to your collection, now is the perfect time. I love The Game because they give me those great Utah hats I love, whether I'm wearing them on this podcast or to go out wherever, even to the games on times. That's what The Game has you covered for, is a great selection of Utah hats. With hundreds of officially licensed college hats to choose from, you'll find the perfect fit for game day and every day. Don't miss this chance to celebrate 40 years of The Game. With 40% off your entire order, visit thegamecaps.com and use promo code LOCKED ON. It's all caps, no spaces at checkout. That's thegamecaps.com, promo code LOCKED ON, all caps, no spaces, to celebrate 40 years of The Game with 40% off. But don't wait, this anniversary offer won't last forever. Thank you guys again for making Locked On Utes your first listen and view of the day. Brice Larson back with me here. Mentioned a group on the offense, this team that does have a chip on their shoulder. Brice, another one's the offensive line. Phil Steele did his offensive line position rankings. Utah didn't rank in the top 50. Eesh. And I really don't have a huge issue with it, considering they don't return anyone. I think they'll end the year as a top 50. But look, with the benefit of the doubt given the offensive line, kind of left with Jim Harding leaving too. Even though I think the fact that he's mentored a lot of these guys and Jordan Gross just has to put them over the hump, basically, I think is a good sign for Utah. So that's what I'm excited to see, what this group can do, what they are capable of doing. And Coach Scalley did say he was very pleased with the physicality in this week's practice because they have put the pads on since the last time we got to speak to Morgan. Said the loves the progress on the offensive defensive lines and how competitive they are too. And so the one thing is they just got to be competitive without being combative. I think that's that line of physicality you saw. Hey, we saw Spencer Fano and Jared Verse get into a fight over the weekend and the NFL level. So you always see this in fall camp. There's always a little bit of, and he didn't say there were scrums for sure, but it sounds like they're towing that line. And that's a good thing right now, I feel like.
Look, hey, I even think that a little bit of a scrum is a good thing in football every once in a while. I think that in fall camp, if you get a Kirk Cousins trying to take on a Max Crosby, right, it's a good thing because that means these guys care. It's one thing to have to get dudes motivated out there and to get them fired up a little bit. If you're trying to wake them up, that's not the case. You're trying to rein them in a little bit. And that's what you want when you recruit these big time dudes who are playing football out there for you. So I think that's overall, that's a good thing. This offensive line should have, like we said, that motivation to go out there and be the best offensive line that they can be, because a lot of people don't think they can be very good. And Phil Steele is a great example of that all around as well. Can they put it together? We're going to find out. It's going to be really fun and interesting to see how it all looks when they put it together. Because one thing I will say, when you're recruited, you're recruited specifically to play a position where they feel like your body type, your movement type can fit. You're recruited to fit a scheme. But the one thing that's come out of as a theme out of Utah fall camp so far is that in years prior, it was, this is my scheme, you're going to fit it, and we're going to play this way. This year, it sounds like from Morgan Scalley and his coordinators, we're going to make the scheme fit these players. We're going to do things that these guys do best because it fits who we have on this roster. And I thought that was an interesting way to think of it, JT.
I think Kevin McGibbon, part of the reason he's Utah's offensive coordinator is the plan he crafted. We've heard it's very similar to what he did last year to get Devon Dampier going once again. I don't think it's like, hey, we're bringing you on because you have the best scheme of all of them. Maybe he did of all the candidates they interviewed. But I also think a huge part of that was you have a great plan for Devon, and that really excites us too. I want to go back to the offensive line because we're talking about Phil Steele and the lack of confidence. Well, it's hard to not lack a little confidence when, Brice, they don't know who the starting five is yet. He said, he was asked, when do you want to have that starting five figured out? He said, ideally today, but it's a work in progress. And those guys know they're continually competing. Once we feel like we get that five, they'll know, because it's important that those guys gel. But right now, we're not there. Once again, appreciate the honesty from Morgan. And they've said before, right? I think they've definitely narrowed it down. It's not like, hey, we got all 15 guys in the room competing for a starting spot. They've narrowed it down. I think some of the positions are locked up. I think it's just a couple of spots where we're seeing those guys jockey for it too. But I mean, it's August 10th. We are less than a month away from the first game. I feel like at least, if by next week they could be okay, they need to at least 2 weeks before their first game know who that group is going to be, because there is a difference between starter and backup reps, and they got to start to maximize that. This group already has this offensive line has no game experience playing together as these five guys have rotated in, sure, a little bit, but their communication is so paramount to this team's success. They got to start building that in practice, and it'll be a nice test against Idaho before the Razorbacks come in, which is a massive test, obviously.
Yeah, it's going to be a huge opportunity for them to be able to gel together a little bit. It's the same reason why Devon Dampier in the offseason was throwing footballs out in Arizona with his wide receivers. Guys that, okay, maybe he's had a couple of reps with, but he needs to get to know a little bit more. It's the same situation there along the offensive line. You need to know that this guy next to you has your back, and that's only something that you get from being in battle with that guy. And that's something that offense is going to learn rather quickly.
It is something they're going to learn rather quickly. And we did hear overall there has been a ton of progress on the offense, better execution, he said, too, less false starts, which that's another huge thing for the offensive line. That'll be, if it's a close, they should win big against Iowa State. That's my opinion. Cyclones turnover, so much new. I know it's 2 new head coaches. Utah brings a ton back compared to Iowa State, especially. We lost a lot of production compared to Iowa State. We're like a team returning all their starters without what they lost. I think Utah is a Big 12 contender. I think they should go in and win that game handedly. If it's a close game, Bryce, it's because of things like the penalties and the lack of execution and the miscues of that sort. And to me, that's where they're lucky they have those first 3 games at home. Not just 2 of the 3 being against very favorable competition, but 2 of the 3 at home, so you can really hone in on your confusion, on your continuity, because there's one thing I know about Ames. I'd be surprised if those fans didn't at least still show up for that game, right? It's going to be a ruckus environment, and Utah's got to be ready to go.
Yeah, no doubt. That's something that Utah has to be ready to rock and roll for. I love that Arkansas is early on the schedule too, because that's not a team that necessarily is the greatest team in the world. They lost their head coach. They lost a lot of their stuff in the offseason. That's an opportunity for you to make a little bit of a statement early on in the season.
Yes.
And it's in a good position where you can get a game or 2 under your belt first before you go into such a big time game. You get that one at home as well. There's not a better situation for that game, JT.
Is it an overreaction if this team's even 5-1 going into the Houston game? I think it's fair to question, like, if they're Big 12 contenders. If they have 1 loss with that start of the schedule, and maybe the Buffs will be better in surprises. I have to see Lewis make a huge leap before I could say that. Kansas, I just don't trust. The Kansas starting quarterback, I forgot his name. He was the backup last year. They're technically still having a competition. The backup's going to win. That Kansas quarterback goes and wins in Salt Lake. He'd be the worst quarterback to win here in easily a decade. So these are the type of things. If just Utah is not undefeated going into that Houston game, and I know they got things to figure out and sort out and all that nature, and maybe, hey, they just need to lose one early and then they become a different team the rest of the way. That does happen sometimes, Bryce. But it really does feel like this team needs to get all this figured out now. They can make some mistakes against these bad teams. Bad's a little rough. These inferior teams, what should be inferior teams. And they need to be ready to go for that last 6-game stretch, because that's really what their season is.
Yeah, there's a lot better games on the back end of that schedule. Is it crazy, though, that I feel like Kansas is going to be a lot better this year than they have been in the last couple of years?
I could see it.
I think maybe this recency bias from Indiana winning a national championship and just the transfer portal and different things like that might be playing into this. But I think Kansas could be a sleeper in the Big 12 this upcoming season in terms of that's the team. There's always one team that we're not sure what they are preseason. Nobody sees it ever coming. That team was Arizona State a couple of years ago.
Of course.
You see it every single year in the Big 12.
It was BYU last year with the lack of a quarterback.
Yeah. Is it possible that it's Kansas this upcoming season? I think so, because I think we all see Arizona being good. We all see Houston being good. We all can see maybe a TCU, but nobody's talking about Kansas being good or even great.
Mm-hmm.
Could it be Kansas?
There's a chance. I mean, the one thing I actually do think is really interesting is you invoked Indiana, which of course it was Indiana and Kansas for the 2010s. Those were like the 2 worst Power 4 football teams, or Power 5, whatever you want to say. They were terrible. And I do think Leipold's a good coach. Colden Mickey being back there. That's where I think it'll just take them some time to gel, but you're not wrong. They do have, I like their running back room. They did get Dylan Edwards as a transfer in there, so they got some guys in the running back room. I don't know about QB. Left side of the O-line is back. I didn't love their O-line last year. They're fine, but they should run the ball okay if that right side can come together too. Leading tacklers back. The couple secondary guys are there too. Just got to see how the rest of that defense does stopping the run. But look, if Utah's not careful, that could turn into a game. Kansas State was not supposed to be a game last year. Coming into the season, we actually thought it could be a game. And then obviously the Wildcats had just total up and down season. So these are the type of things that'll play themselves out over the course of the season. But you're right. Maybe the Kansas game will be tough for that. I still think at Colorado of that first bunch is their toughest game. Would you give it the Kansas game?
I think the Kansas game is going to be. I just don't see it. I can't see it with Colorado. Like, I understand there's a lot of hype coming out of Colorado fall camp. We've heard hype around Colorado for how many years, JT? Sanders hasn't done anything.
They justified it once. That was it.
there hasn't been anything that has shown me that Colorado can win football games consistently and be a tough game.
Yeah.
I just think Koldelnicki's offense is one of the best in college football. Now, did that happen at Penn State? No. There was a lot of problems at Penn State. I think we learned that, and I don't think we can. It's fair to blame Koldelnicki. When Koldelnicki was at Kansas, those were some of the best offenses we saw at Kansas year over year. And all I'm saying is I think that you might see that revive once again, because it's like a triple option offense out of the pistol, and there's so much misdirection, and you don't know where that ball's going. Yeah. Now, do they have a play caller in terms of a quarterback that can execute what he needs him to do? I don't know. That's the biggest question, and we're going to find out.
We are going to find out, and I'm big on home and road, especially with Utah. I think that's why I'm leaning a little more towards the Buffs. Locked On College Football, Spencer McLaughlin has the Buffs game as a loss for the Utes right now. So that's where it's I know. We talked to him last week, so that's where he's sitting at right that one. Bryce disagrees with that, but
get me out of Colorado. Utah's not losing to Colorado. I'll shave my head if Utah loses to Colorado, JT.
What a bold thing of you to do. It's like me shaving. I thought about coming into this year being like, if Utah goes undefeated, doesn't lose the game, I'll shave my head. And it's just like, everyone just give me crap. And then I've gone bald and everyone's
I'll shave my beard.
There you go. Shave the beard. There we go. Okay. If Utah loses to Colorado, Brice Larson will shave his beard.
Clean shaven.
Book it? Deal?
Yeah. If Utah loses to Colorado, I will clean shave my face.
I'll clip that. I will clip that.
I'll do it on Locked On Utes. I'll get out the razor and start doing it.
Well, I hope I don't have to see that because I want Utah to win. But at least there will be. That would be funny if they did end up losing again. Speaking of Utah opponents, let's talk about the Cougars a little bit. They got fall camp going down too. Let's just check in with our biggest rival coming up next. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. Baseball fans, if you think you know who's hitting a home run today, FanDuel is giving you a free chance to call your shot with Daily Dingers. It's easy to play. Just make your free picks for who you think will hit a home run in their game. If you're right, you'll receive a profit boost to use on the next bet for a chance at extra winnings. Best of all, you can make free picks every day throughout the MLB season. Daily Dingers is another fun way to stay engaged with every day's games. Whether you're following your favorite team or keeping an eye on matches across the league, every game has someone capable of going deep. And now you get the chance to make your prediction before first pitch. I always love the MLB season, especially this time of year. We're getting down to a few postseason, still a little ways off, but we're not crazy off. Of course, All-Star game in the rearview mirror too. And one of my favorite parts about baseball is that every day does bring those fresh matchups too and storylines. So Daily Dingers gives you a chance and a reason to pay attention before that first pitch. So are you ready to play your game today? Join all the action at FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com to play Daily Dingers and make your free pick on who's hitting a homer. Play ball and swing for the fences on FanDuel, an official partner of the MLB. All right, close out our show today by talking about it's the most important game on Utah's schedule. It's not even close. It's BYU. They have to win this game this year. I think if Utah goes 7-5, I think all the conversations would be, man, that sucked, but at least we beat BYU. 7-5 and not beating BYU would be considered by many a disaster, I think. Like, that's the type of hype that will lead up and go into this game, losing to them a fourth straight time. Bryce, feels like the Cougars have had a solid start to fall camp so far. I think, if anything, I'm probably if you're a Cougar fan, the Cougar fans are probably most encouraged by how the tight ends and pass catchers have looked so far. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, no doubt about it. Guys like Roger Saliapaga, Walker Lyons at the tight end position. I think they're going to use the tight end a lot more, even saying that, Carson Ryan was utilized a lot last year. But a lot more because they're just not 100% sure what's happening at the wide receiver position. And right now, I think they're starting to carve that out. I think JoJo Phillips, who was injured a lot last year, is going to be a big-time pass catcher. But that's to say he was injured a lot last year. And my biggest question is, we see a lot of this hype early on about the pass catchers and a lot of people saying, oh, I'm not worried about who's catching balls for BYU, because they're putting out videos of Bear Bachmeier throwing it across the middle, of all of these dudes getting behind. Legend Glasgow, a true freshman, getting behind the back end of the BYU defense and scoring a touchdown. There's a lot of hype about Legend Glasgow coming out in spring ball as well. JT, the one thing that we talked about earlier in the show was, and my biggest question mark is the back end of the BYU defense. What is that going to look like? Because the depth for BYU, their starters are fine at safety and at corner. No more Gennaro Guilford, the defensive backs coach. How are they going to use the corners? Who's behind the starting corners? Who is in the two deep behind that? That is something that hasn't been super talked about amongst BYU media, amongst the BYU faithful. It's kind of just been something that's disregarded. The back end of the BYU defense might be the biggest question mark heading into this next season. And I'm curious to see how that two deep in the rotation looks and who those wide receivers are actually beating in practice in those clips, because all we see is the ball being thrown in the air and the wide receiver catching it. Who was the one that was guarding it? Second string, third string? Was it a first string? Those are my questions.
I think it's always so fun. That's why I had to laugh when you started to talk about, like, BYU fans watch a clip and go, we're saved. Pass game, awesome. This is such a dangerous thing to clip a rep and take, I shouldn't say not for the department to clip a rep, but to take a rep as this will translate into the game. It's fixed. We're fine. BYU's pass game could be totally fine. But and same thing with Utah's, right? But like watching a big play in fall camp or anything that's clipped and going, we got this here. Like Semi Taulonga had that 20-yard reception, catch and run, right? Like if he was free, I'm just going to be honest. If he was constantly doing that, would Utah have put that out there? I'm going to say probably not, because they want to keep him hidden. You know who they kept crazy hidden last year? Dallin Bentley, who completely broke out. I think Semi will have more than one reception this year. If he had more than 20, I'd be surprised. Like, it's just based on what we've seen from him overall.
He should, though. He should.
I would. Oh my gosh, if I'm the offensive coordinator. If I'm the offensive coordinator, who's Wayshawn Parker, Bird Ficklin? I mean, I might even take Devon off the field, just direct snap it to him and have a good time out there. But this is just always, and this applies for Utah too. You have to be so careful with fall camp. Like we talk about it, we'll break it down. And that's where I appreciate Morgan's honesty on, like, hey, the offense is struggling with the 2-minute drill. Just because we think this could be the best wide receiver group we've seen in some time doesn't mean it's actually going to be. All this stuff is still a work in product. And as these coaches constantly preach, this stuff is not a finished product. All these teams have a lot of work to do. And just because Legend Glasgow makes one grab in practice doesn't mean that BYU's pass game is saved.
Right, exactly. And that's something that we're never going to fully understand until we hit probably game 2 for BYU. Yeah. We're going to find out game 2. Utah Tech, who is in the preseason poll last in the Big Sky. I don't think we're going to learn a lot about about this BYU team with Utah Tech right out of the gates. Yeah. So we'll see. We'll see how it all turns out. Maybe we will, actually. And that would be worst case scenario for BYU if we're finding something out against Utah Tech. Week 2, though, Arizona. They kick it off early in Big 12 play. So you're going to find out really quickly, if you're a BYU fan, what BYU is going to bring to the table in week number 2 when Arizona shows up on the schedule.
I'm thinking about predicting that as a loss for the Cougars. I'm not there yet, but I'm just a big fan of Fafita, and I just think he's the type that could go in there and do something crazy. It's hard to win in Provo. It's really hard to win in Provo. I'm just saying, I'm thinking about it. I'm flirting with it, Bryce. I'm flirting with it.
Double overtime game last year down in Tucson. Almost lost it.
Yeah. At the time,
it's a good Arizona team.
Funny how the season goes, too. We thought that was a bad game for BYU at the time, and come to down the season end, it's like, oh, no, it's a top 5 team in the conference. And could very well be again this year. I know they lost a lot in the secondary. I think that DC they got down there is really good. I think he's going to have a good plan. And we even talked about this on your show last week. I just feel like they're kind of like, we're fine without Jay Hill. I'm not so sure. We'll see. We heard that the new DC KP has been working really hard. I believe that. I know Gary Anderson does a good job. I'm not just convinced this is smooth sailing. I think BYU deserves to be ranked second in the Big 12, arguably even first. But I'm not just convinced that they are going to cakewalk through this conference because even though they've had good years, there's not been a cakewalk the last couple of years for BYU.
And remember last year, how many games did they win coming down to the wire, whether it was in overtime? I think they went to overtime at Colorado.
Yes.
Overtime, double overtime against Arizona. There was a couple that they had to win at the buzzer. Like, we don't know who the kicker is going to be for BYU and what the special teams units are going to look like as well. Special teams can win you or lose you a game. One missed field goal could win you or lose you a game. And that's what it comes down to sometimes when these margins are razor thin with these college kids that you're trotting out there on the field.
I know people always say if, ands, or buts, but even the Utah game, if you tackle Bear Bachmeier, one of the 10 dudes on defense who misses them, Cougars have to kick a field goal there. Utah has a chance to win on that last drive. Like, these are just the type of things in the margins that are so close. You want to get one last word?
What happens if you kick a couple field goals instead of going for it on fourth down?
And we're out of time on today's episode of Locked On Utes. So great to have, we both know the answer to that. So great to have Brice Larson on, as always. Make sure you guys check him out on Brice and Bianucci every weekday morning. Brice, appreciate you coming on. Tell everyone else what you got coming up too.
Yeah, throughout the rest of this week, we're going to roll with fall camp as well. 103.9, 98.3 FM every single morning from 7 to 10 a.m. or over on the Brice and Bianucci podcast, wherever you get your podcasts.
Brice, you're the best. Appreciate making the time.
No problem.
That's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Utes. We'll be back with you soon talking all things in Utah athletics and Camp Scalley.